Debbie and I talk pretty much daily about the ongoing impeachment trial in the Texas Senate of Attorney General Ken Paxton. Now, we know Ken Paxton. Ken Paxton is a friend of ours. He's been a guest on the podcast. He's worked with Debbie on some political projects. This is even before I knew Debbie. Debbie's been pretty enmeshed in Texas politics for quite a while, at least going back to 2008 or maybe 2008 or 2009. And this is when it first dawned on her that she was looking at Obama and she goes, basically, I see a version of Hugo Chavez. I need to get involved. The terrors of Venezuela are now being visited on the United States. And so Debbie became involved nationally, but she also became involved very much locally. All right, so Ken Paxton has enemies. He's got a lot of enemies, and some of them are Republicans. Now, they tend to be Republicans of the moderate. I wouldn't say necessarily rhinos, because it's not that they're Republicans just in name, but they're establishment Republicans. And there are a lot of those guys in Texas, and there are some of them that decided that it's time to get rid of Ken Paxton. Now, they didn't just decide that because they thought, well, look, Ken Paxton's a bad guy. We don't like him. Let's get rid of him. But let's remember that there were other Republicans who ran against Ken Paxton. So there are powerful people in Texas. One of them is a member of the Bush family. George P. And there were others who ran against Ken Paxton. And so you've got a peculiar dynamic in the situation where your rivals who have been defeated in the primary, and then you, Ken Paxton, go on to win, they all have a sort of an interest. Now, I'm not saying that they're all actively conspiring, and certainly not to the same degree, but they wouldn't mind seeing Ken Paxton out of the running in the same way that some of the rivals of Trump wouldn't mind seeing Trump out of the running because it clears the pathway for them. Now, I've been following the trial hour by hour or anything, but I've been watching the cross-examination of, I think, 4 or 5 witnesses now, by Tony Buzbee, by the way, a very good attorney who's representing Paxton. And a lot of things are emerging out of this that are making things, at least in my mind, pretty clear. Number one, Ken Paxton was indiscreet. He was wrong. He did have an affair. And Debbie and I were talking about this in the car on the way to the podcast, that this is probably going to hurt Paxton politically because a lot of his supporters were diehard evangelicals. They're supporters who saw him as a family man, who saw him as somebody who was one of them. And so this is clearly, to some degree, a sordid business. And the reason, now, initially, I didn't know whether he had the affair or anything, but I saw Tony Buzbee in one of these clips saying, it's not the worst thing in the world. I mean, someone who's had an affair hasn't necessarily committed a crime, have they? And so I take that to mean when your own lawyer is saying things like that, well, there was an affair. So that's something that Ken Paxton has to deal with, not just, by the way, with his wife and family, but he has to deal with it politically because there are consequences when your supporters are firmly in, or a number of them, in the evangelical camp. But having said that, goes on, I find out that virtually everything else that is being alleged against Ken Paxton is extremely suspect and dubious. And so, for example, I find out, number one, that George P. Bush apparently has reapplied for his law license. Very interesting coincidental phenomenon. Here, Ken Paxton is undergoing a trial that, if he's removed, would vacate the position of Attorney General. George P. Bush was one of the contenders for it last time. He's now applied for his license, presumably to say, hey, I'm eligible, I'm here, I can do the job. So this suggests, if you will, that there are hidden hands behind all this that are pushing the process. Number two, some of the people in Ken Paxton's office will go to the FBI and report these possible violations of law. And so the question becomes, what were those violations? What did they know about that Ken Paxton did? And it turns out they knew nothing. All they did was they produced allegations. He received gifts. Well, what were those gifts? Who gave them to him and for what purpose? I don't know. I just thought that this is a potential violation. Or that he's running the office in an organized crime manner, says one guy. What organized crimes were going on in the office? I don't know. I'm not speaking specifically. I just heard from one guy and a second guy that there was something that was going on. Well, isn't it true that you yourself applied for a job in that office shortly after you made this complaint? Well, yes, it is true. Well, if you thought that organized crime was being carried out of that office and you consider yourself a decent and straight-laced guy, why would you apply for a job that involves participating in these organized crimes? And so it goes on like this, case after case. And what you realize is that this is a political hit through and through. It's a political hit that is somewhat camouflaged because some of the people doing the hit are Republicans. Now, it's being egged on by the Democrats. It's really clear that the Republicans against Paxton are working with people like the Attorney General not the Attorney General, but the prosecuting attorney in Travis County. Travis County includes Austin. This is perhaps the most liberal part of Texas. Needless to say that the prosecutor there is a Democrat. So what you have is Democrats are gleefully participating in all this. It's a wonderful opportunity for them to get rid of a nuisance of a powerful Attorney General who is actually conservative and carries out conservative policies and is running the office in a conservative manner. So it looks to me like this is something very underhanded that is going on against Paxton. Not that Paxton is entirely in the right, but in terms of criminality, it doesn't look like he has done anything, I repeat, anything, to justify his removal from office. As you get older, the aches and pains start kicking in, and sometimes it's the slightest movement of your arm or foot or back that produces these aches and pains. Well, there's now a remedy, and it's called Relief Factor. Debbie and I started taking Relief Factor a couple of years ago, and what a difference we've seen in our joints. Nothing short of amazing. Aches and pains are totally gone thanks to this 100% drug-free solution. Now, how does it work? Relief Factor supports your body's fight against inflammation that's the source of aches and pains. The vast majority of people who try Relief Factor order more because it works for them. Debbie's a true believer. She's now able to do exercises, planks, push-ups, and so on that for a long time she wasn't able to do. So Relief Factor, it's been a real game changer for her, her aunt, other members of our family, Mike, here in the studio, and many other people. You too can benefit. Try it for yourself. Order the 3-week quick start for the discounted price of just $19.95. Go to relieffactor.com or call 800-4-RELIEF to find out more about this offer. The number again to call, 800-4-RELIEF, or go to relieffactor.com. Feel the difference.